Maria Santos had always been small for her age, standing barely 5 feet 2 inches tall with delicate features that made people assume she was fragile. Growing up in a rough neighborhood in East Los Angeles, she learned early that appearances could be deceiving. While other kids her age were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, Maria was helping her single mother work double shifts at the local diner and studying late into the night by the light of a flickering desk lamp. Her fascination with firearms began at age 12 when her uncle, a retired Marine, took her to a shooting range for the first time. He wanted to teach her self-defense after a series of break-ins in their neighborhood. The moment Maria wrapped her small hands around the grip of a .22 caliber pistol, something clicked. The weight felt natural, the mechanics made sense, and, when she squeezed the trigger for the first time, her shot hit dead center of the target. The range instructor, a grizzled veteran named Bob, watched in amazement as this tiny girl consistently outshot grown men who had been coming to his range for years. "Kid's got a natural gift," he told her uncle. "Never seen anything like it." But when Maria excitedly told her classmates about her new hobby, they laughed. Girls weren't supposed to be good with guns, they said, especially not small, quiet girls who got straight A's and helped their mothers with groceries. Throughout high school, Maria continued visiting the range every weekend, working part-time jobs to pay for ammunition and training. She studied ballistics textbooks the way other teenagers studied fashion magazines. Her bedroom walls were covered with targets she had shot, each one showing tighter and tighter groupings. But when she mentioned wanting to pursue a career in law enforcement or the military, her guidance counselor shook his head. "Have you considered nursing or teaching?" he suggested. "Those might be more suitable for someone like you." The doubt followed her everywhere. When she applied to the police academy after graduating high school, the recruiter looked her up and down skeptically. "Are you sure you're in the right place, miss?" he asked. "The secretary applications are down the hall." Even her own family worried she was setting herself up for failure. Her mother begged her to reconsider, fearing that her daughter's small frame would make her a target in such a dangerous profession. But Maria had learned something important during those years at the shooting range. Size didn't matter when you had skill, dedication, and an unwavering focus. Every time someone told her she couldn't do something because she was too small, too young, or too female, she channeled that doubt into determination. She would prove them wrong, one shot at a time. The police academy was brutal. Physical training that left grown men gasping for breath. Tactical scenarios that tested mental toughness under extreme pressure. And firearms training that separated the naturally gifted from those who merely hoped to get by. While her classmates struggled with the weight of their service weapons during long training sessions, Maria's arms remained steady. While others flinched at the sound of gunfire during stress scenarios, she remained calm and collected. Her marksmanship scores were unprecedented. She could place 5 shots in a grouping smaller than a quarter from 50 yards away. During low-light training exercises, she could identify and neutralize targets that others couldn't even see clearly. Her instructors began to take notice, but even they struggled to believe what they were witnessing. "Santos," Sergeant Williams called out after another perfect score at the range. "How long have you been shooting?" When she told him about her weekend trips to Bob's range, he shook his head in disbelief. "Most of our recruits have been hunting, or shooting recreationally for years before they get here. You're telling me you learned all this in a few years of weekend practice?" The other recruits began to watch her more carefully. Some were impressed, others were intimidated, and a few were openly resentful. "She's just lucky," one particularly vocal classmate named Rodriguez muttered after Maria outshot him for the 3rd time that week. "Probably gets special treatment because she's a girl." The comment stung, but Maria had heard variations of it her entire life. She let her performance speak for itself. As graduation approached, Maria found herself at the top of her class academically and held every marksmanship record the academy had on file. But she knew that real-world policing would be different from controlled training environments. The streets didn't care about her perfect test scores or her ability to hit a bullseye from incredible distances. Out there, she would face suspects who might not take her seriously because of her appearance, fellow officers who might doubt her capabilities, and situations where split-second decisions could mean the difference between life and death. The night before graduation, She stood alone on the academy's outdoor range, the California sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She loaded her service weapon and took aim at a target 100 yards away, a distance that most officers would consider beyond their effective range. The shot rang out across the empty range, and when she walked down to check the target, she found a perfect hole dead center of the bullseye. Tomorrow she would become Officer Maria Santos, badge number 4127. She had no idea that this moment of quiet confidence would be one of the last peaceful ones she would experience for a very long time. The streets of Los Angeles were about to test everything she had learned, and the world was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous things come in the smallest packages. Officer Maria Santos's first day on patrol was everything she had expected and nothing she had prepared for. Her training officer, Sergeant Mike Thompson, was a 20-year veteran with graying temples and eyes that had seen too much. When he first met his new partner, he did a double take. "You're Santos?" he asked, checking his paperwork twice. "I was expecting someone more." He paused, searching for diplomatic words. "Someone bigger." Their first week together was a series of routine calls. Domestic disputes, traffic stops, shoplifting reports. Thompson watched Maria handle each situation with professional calm, but she could see the doubt in his eyes. He positioned himself closer to suspects when she was questioning them, ready to step in if things went wrong. During their meal breaks, other officers would joke about Thompson getting stuck with babysitting duty. The whispers followed her everywhere. At roll call, veteran officers would glance her way and shake their heads. In the locker room, she overheard conversations about how the department's standards were dropping, how political correctness was putting everyone at risk. One particularly vocal sergeant named Martinez made it clear he thought her academy scores were inflated. "Range performance doesn't mean anything on the street," he announced loudly during one briefing. "Out here it's about presence, intimidation, physical capability, not target practice." Maria absorbed every slight, every doubtful glance, every condescending comment. She arrived early for every shift, studied case files during her off hours, and volunteered for additional training whenever possible. But she knew that words wouldn't change minds. Only action would prove her worth. Her opportunity came during her third week on patrol. Thompson was driving through a residential neighborhood when dispatch crackled over the radio. "All units, armed robbery in progress at First National Bank. Corner of Maple and 3rd. Multiple suspects, shots fired. Officers requesting immediate backup." Thompson hit the sirens and floored the accelerator. As they raced toward the scene, Maria checked her weapon and mentally reviewed active shooter protocols. Her heart was pounding, but her hands remained steady. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed about during all those hours at the shooting range. They arrived to find chaos. 2 patrol cars were already on scene, their officers taking cover behind their vehicles. The bank's front windows were shattered, and they could hear shouting from inside. Sergeant Martinez was coordinating the response, his voice tight with tension, as he spoke into his radio. "Santos, Thompson, take position on the east side," Martinez ordered when he saw them approach. "We're waiting for SWAT, but if these guys try to run, we need all exits covered." Maria could see him hesitate before adding, "Santos, stay behind cover. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary." For 45 minutes, they maintained their positions while SWAT prepared their assault. Maria crouched behind a concrete barrier, her service weapon drawn, watching the bank's side exit through her iron sights. Thompson was positioned 30 feet away, covering the same area from a different angle. Then everything changed in an instant. The side door burst open and 3 armed men came running out, firing wildly as they tried to reach a getaway car parked in the alley. Thompson immediately returned fire, but the suspects were moving fast and using parked cars for cover. One of the robbers broke away from the group, running directly toward Maria's position. He was tall, heavily built, and carrying what looked like a modified assault rifle. As he rounded the corner of a parked truck, he spotted Maria crouched behind her barrier. For a split second, their eyes met across 30 yards of open space. Maria could see the surprise on his face. He hadn't expected to encounter a police officer in this position, and certainly hadn't expected that officer to be a small woman. His hesitation lasted exactly 1 second too long. In that moment, every hour Maria had spent at the shooting range, every perfect score she had achieved at the academy, every doubt that had been expressed about her abilities crystallized into pure focus. She rose slightly from her crouch, brought her weapon up to eye level, and squeezed the trigger 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot struck the suspect's center mass, spinning him around. The second shot stopped his forward momentum completely. The third shot was insurance, fired as he was falling to ensure he could no longer pose a threat to anyone. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 seconds. When the suspect hit the ground, his weapon clattered across the asphalt, well out of reach. Maria maintained her sight picture for another few seconds, ensuring he was no longer a threat, before calling out, "Suspect down," and moving to secure his weapon. The scene fell into an eerie quiet. Even the other 2 suspects seemed shocked by how quickly their partner had been neutralized. Within minutes, SWAT had the remaining robbers in custody and paramedics were attending to the fallen suspect. He would survive, but he would walk with a permanent limp and spend the next 15 years in federal prison. As the scene was being processed, other officers began approaching Maria's position to see what had happened. The suspect had been 30 yards away when she engaged him, moving at a full run, firing an automatic weapon. All 3 of her shots had found their mark in a grouping smaller than a dinner plate. "Jesus Christ," Thompson muttered as he examined the scene. "Santos, how the hell did you make that shot?" Even Martinez was speechless as he looked from Maria to the fallen suspect and back again. Word of the shooting spread through the department like wildfire. Officers who had been skeptical about Maria's abilities began asking questions. How had such a small woman managed to stop an armed robber who outweighed her by 80 pounds? How had she remained so calm under pressure? How had she made such an accurate shot while under fire? The official investigation would later conclude that Officer Santos had acted with exceptional skill and professionalism, likely preventing civilian casualties and possibly saving the lives of fellow officers. But Maria knew that one good shooting, no matter how impressive, wouldn't be enough to silence all the doubters. As she drove home that night, her hands finally began to shake as the adrenaline wore off. She had proven she could perform under pressure, but she also knew that the real test was just beginning. Word would spread beyond her department, and soon she would face scrutiny from people whose standards were far higher than local law enforcement. She had no idea that less than 6 months later, her exceptional performance would come to the attention of someone who would change the entire trajectory of her career, someone who understood that the most powerful weapons often came in the most unexpected packages. 6 months after the bank robbery incident, Maria had settled into a routine as a patrol officer. The shooting had earned her respect within her department, but she still faced skepticism from some quarters. Her accuracy with firearms had become legendary among her colleagues, with some officers requesting her as backup specifically for high-risk situations involving armed suspects. What Maria didn't know was that her exceptional marksmanship had attracted attention from far beyond the Los Angeles Police Department. Her shooting reports had been flagged by federal databases that tracked unusual police performance metrics. These systems were designed to identify officers with extraordinary skills who might be suitable for specialized federal task forces or training programs. Commander Jake Harrison was reviewing potential candidates for a joint anti-terrorism operation when Maria's file crossed his desk. Harrison was a 15-year Navy SEAL veteran who now led a specialized unit that worked with local law enforcement on high-value targets. He had seen thousands of shooting reports during his career, but Maria's accuracy statistics were unlike anything in his experience. "This can't be right," he muttered to his assistant, Lieutenant Sarah Chen. "These numbers show she's never missed a qualifying shot in 8 months of active duty. Never. And look at these engagement distances." He pointed to the screen. 30-yard moving target engagement with 3 hits center mass. Most of my SEALs would be impressed with that shot. Chen pulled up the video footage from the bank robbery, which had been shared with federal agencies as part of the case file. They watched in silence as Maria engaged the armed suspect with textbook precision. Harrison had trained elite military snipers who might struggle with that shot under combat conditions. "Sir," Chen said after watching the footage twice, "maybe we should consider her for the next joint operation. We could use someone with those skills, especially for overwatch positions." Harrison was skeptical. He had worked with local law enforcement many times, and while he respected their service, military and police work required different skill sets. SEALs underwent years of specialized training in conditions that most civilians couldn't imagine. The idea of bringing a small-town police officer into a federal anti-terrorism operation seemed ridiculous. "She's probably just good at range shooting," he said dismissively. "Combat shooting is completely different. Stress, movement, multiple targets, unknown variables. I doubt she could handle real operational pressure." But Chen persisted. "What if we bring her in for evaluation? Standard marksmanship assessment, stress testing, tactical scenarios. If she fails, we know she's not suitable. But if she passes..." She let the sentence hang in the air. 3 weeks later, Maria received a phone call that would change her life. The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Officer Santos, this is Lieutenant Chen with Naval Special Warfare Command. We'd like to invite you to participate in a specialized training evaluation. The program involves collaboration between federal and local agencies. Are you interested?" Maria's heart raced. She had no idea what she was being invited to, but the opportunity to work with federal agencies was beyond anything she had imagined when she first became a police officer. "Yes, ma'am. I'm very interested." The evaluation took place at a military facility outside San Diego. Maria had never been on a military base before, and the experience was intimidating. Everything was larger, more organized, and more intense than civilian law enforcement. The other candidates were all military personnel, most of them special forces operators with years of combat experience. Harrison watched from an observation tower as Maria reported for the marksmanship evaluation. She looked even smaller standing next to the Navy SEALs and Army Rangers who made up the rest of the candidate pool. Several of the operators made jokes about the local cop who thought she belonged with elite military units. "This is going to be embarrassing," Harrison told Chen. "I should have listened to my instincts and stuck with military personnel only." The first test was basic marksmanship at various distances, using standard military weapons. Maria had never fired most of these weapons before, but the fundamentals were the same: breath control, sight alignment, trigger squeeze, follow-through. She took a few practice shots with each weapon to understand its characteristics, then began the qualification course. By the end of the first day, she had outshot every other candidate. Not by a little, but by margins that seemed impossible. At 300 yards with a standard M4 rifle, she was hitting targets that some of the Special Forces operators were struggling to see clearly. "Beginner's luck," muttered one SEAL named Rodriguez after reviewing the scores. "Let's see how she does when things get complicated." The second day involved stress shooting scenarios. Candidates had to engage targets while under physical stress, time pressure, and simulated combat conditions. They were required to run obstacle courses, perform demanding physical tasks, then immediately transition to precision shooting. Harrison expected Maria to fall behind here. Combat shooting while exhausted and under pressure was where the gap between civilian and military training typically became obvious. He positioned himself where he could watch her performance directly, ready to end the evaluation if she proved to be a safety risk. What he witnessed instead left him speechless. After completing a grueling obstacle course that left several Navy SEALs breathing heavily, Maria approached the firing line with her heart rate elevated, but her hands perfectly steady. She engaged multiple targets at varying distances with the same mechanical precision she had shown during the static range exercises. "How is she doing that?" Harrison asked Chen, who was monitoring the candidate's vital signs through electronic sensors. "Her heart rate is elevated, she's obviously fatigued, but look at those groupings. It's like the stress isn't affecting her shooting at all." Chen studied the readouts. "Sir, her heart rate spikes during the physical challenges, but watch what happens when she transitions to shooting." She pointed to the monitor. "It drops to almost resting levels within seconds. I've never seen anything like it." The third day was tactical scenarios involving simulated hostage situations, moving targets, and complex decision-making under pressure. This was where Harrison expected Maria's lack of military training to become apparent. Making split-second decisions about when to shoot and when to hold fire required experience that couldn't be taught in a police academy. Instead, Maria proved to be as exceptional at tactical thinking as she was at marksmanship. During a simulated hostage rescue, she identified and neutralized 3 threats while avoiding injury to 4 hostages positioned throughout a mock building. Her shots were so precise that she was able to engage targets within inches of innocent civilians without risk. By the end of the 3-day evaluation, Harrison's opinion had completely changed. Maria hadn't just passed the assessment. She had exceeded the performance of every other candidate, many of whom had years of combat experience and specialized military training. That evening, Harrison called Maria into his office for a private conversation. She sat across from his desk, still unsure whether she had performed well enough to be accepted into whatever program this was. "Officer Santos," Harrison began, "I'm going to be honest with you. When I first saw your file, I thought bringing you here was a waste of time. I believed that civilian law enforcement, no matter how good, couldn't compete with military special operations training." Maria's heart sank. She prepared herself for polite rejection and a return to regular patrol duties. "I was wrong," Harrison continued. "In 15 years of military service, I've never seen anyone shoot the way you do. More importantly, I've never seen anyone maintain that level of precision under the kind of stress we put you through this week." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I want to offer you a position with our joint task force. The work is dangerous. The stakes are high, and you'll be operating alongside some of the most elite military units in the world. Are you interested?" Maria struggled to find her voice. 3 days ago, she had been a patrol officer responding to routine calls. Now she was being invited to join an elite federal task force. "Yes, sir. Absolutely." Harrison smiled for the first time since she had arrived at the base. "Good. Because I have a feeling we're going to need someone with your particular skills very soon." Maria's integration into the Joint Task Force was unlike anything she had experienced during her police training. The facility where she now worked was a high-security compound that officially didn't exist on any public records. Her new colleagues were Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force recon operators, and CIA specialists who had spent years in combat zones around the world. Commander Harrison had assigned her to Team Alpha, led by Senior Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, a decorated SEAL with 3 combat deployments. Webb was initially resistant to having a civilian police officer on his team, especially one who looked like she belonged in college rather than a special operations unit. "Harrison, what are you thinking?" Webb had argued during their first briefing. "My team handles the most dangerous operations this task force undertakes. We can't babysit a rookie cop while we're trying to take down high-value targets." Harrison had simply handed Webb Maria's evaluation scores without comment. After reviewing them twice, Webb reluctantly agreed to give her a chance, but made it clear that one mistake would send her back to patrol duty in Los Angeles. The team's first mission together was surveillance of a suspected arms dealer operating out of a warehouse complex in Nevada. Intelligence suggested that the target was selling military-grade weapons to domestic terrorist groups, and the task force had been authorized to gather evidence for a major federal prosecution. Maria's role was overwatch, positioned on a ridge 800 yards from the target building with a high-powered rifle. Her job was to monitor the facility and provide cover for the ground team if things went wrong. It seemed like a simple assignment, perfect for evaluating her performance without putting the primary mission at risk. Webb and 3 other operators approached the warehouse under cover of darkness, planning to plant surveillance equipment and gather intelligence about the dealer's operations. Maria maintained visual contact through her rifle scope, reporting their positions and any changes in the target building's activity. For the first 2 hours, everything went according to plan. The warehouse appeared to be unoccupied, except for a single guard who was more interested in his smartphone than perimeter security. Webb's team successfully planted listening devices and was preparing to withdraw when everything changed. "Alpha 1, this is Overwatch." Maria's voice came through the team's earpieces. "I have movement on the access road. 3 vehicles approaching fast, estimate 12 to 15 armed individuals." Webb checked his watch. The approaching vehicles were 2 hours ahead of the schedule that intelligence had provided. Someone had either made a mistake or the arms dealer had changed his plans. Either way, Webb's team was about to be trapped inside a building with superior numbers closing in on their position. "Alpha 1 copies." Webb responded. "Can you confirm hostile intent?" Through her scope, Maria could see the approaching vehicles clearly. The men inside were carrying assault rifles and moving with military precision. This wasn't a routine business meeting. "Confirmed hostile. They're armed and moving to surround the building. You've got maybe 3 minutes before they establish a perimeter." Webb made a quick decision. His team could try to withdraw immediately, but they would be exposed crossing open ground to reach their extraction point. The safer option was to remain hidden inside the building and wait for the situation to develop, hoping the new arrivals would leave after conducting their business. They chose wrong. The arms dealer's security team began a systematic search of the warehouse, checking every possible hiding spot. Within minutes, they had discovered Webb's team concealed behind shipping containers in the building's rear section. Alpha 1, we are compromised. Webb's voice crackled through Maria's earpiece. Taking fire. Require immediate assistance. Maria could see muzzle flashes through the warehouse windows as a firefight erupted inside the building. She counted at least 12 hostiles outside the building, positioning themselves to prevent any escape attempts. Webb's team was outnumbered 3-1 and trapped in an unfamiliar building with limited cover. Overwatch to command, Maria called into her radio. Team Alpha is pinned down and requires immediate extraction. Multiple hostiles request backup. Command copies, came the response. Nearest backup is 20 minutes out. Maintain overwatch and report. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 hours. The firefight inside the warehouse was intensifying, and Maria could hear the strain in Webb's voice as he coordinated his team's defensive positions. They were running low on ammunition and had limited options for escape. Through her scope, Maria identified the hostile commander, a tall man with a tactical vest who was directing his men's movements around the building's perimeter. He was positioned behind a concrete barrier, approximately 600 yards from her location, well within her effective range but surrounded by his security team. Military rules of engagement were clear about when lethal force could be authorized, but this was a gray area. Maria was not technically military personnel, and the hostile forces had not directly engaged her position. However, she could see that Webb's team would likely be overrun without immediate intervention. Alpha 1, this is Overwatch, she called into her radio. I have a clear shot on the hostile commander. Request permission to engage. There was a pause before Webb responded. Overwatch, that's a negative. Maintain position and observe. We'll work our way out. But Maria could see what Webb couldn't from his position inside the building. 2 more vehicles had arrived, bringing additional hostiles who were setting up heavy weapons to breach the warehouse walls. Webb's team wasn't going to work their way out of anything. They were about to be overwhelmed. She made a decision that would define the rest of her career. Adjusting her scope for wind and distance, she centered her crosshairs on the hostile commander and squeezed the trigger. The .338 Lapua Magnum round covered the 600 yards in less than a second. The hostile commander dropped instantly, creating immediate confusion among his security team. Before they could identify the source of the shot, Maria had acquired her second target, the man who appeared to be second in command. Her second shot eliminated another key leader, causing the remaining hostiles to seek cover and abandon their coordinated assault on the warehouse. In the confusion that followed, Webb's team was able to fight their way to a better defensive position and begin moving toward their extraction point. Overwatch, what the hell was that? Webb's voice came through her earpiece. That was me saving your lives, Maria responded, already scanning for additional targets. You've got a clear path to the north wall. Move now while they're disorganized. Over the next 10 minutes, Maria provided precision cover fire that allowed Webb's team to escape the warehouse and reach their extraction point. Her long-range shooting had eliminated 4 hostile leaders and wounded several others, effectively breaking up what had been a coordinated attempt to capture or kill the entire team. When backup finally arrived, they found the warehouse complex abandoned, except for the bodies of the arms dealer's security team. The dealer himself had escaped, but the intelligence gathered during the operation would eventually lead to his capture and the breakup of his weapons trafficking network. Webb was waiting for Maria when she returned to base that night. She expected criticism for violating his direct orders not to engage the hostiles. Instead, she found a man whose entire perspective had changed. Santos, he said as she approached the briefing room. I owe you an apology. When Harrison assigned you to my team, I thought he had lost his mind. Tonight, you proved that you belong here more than some operators I've worked with for years. He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. You saved my team's lives tonight. More than that, you made decisions under pressure that most people couldn't handle. You've got my complete trust from now on. Word of Maria's performance spread quickly through the special operations community. A police officer who had never seen combat had successfully conducted precision long-range engagements against multiple targets while under extreme pressure. More importantly, She had made split-second tactical decisions that had saved the lives of an entire SEAL team. Commander Harrison called her into his office the next morning, but instead of disciplinary action for disobeying orders, he had a different kind of conversation in mind. "Santos, I'm promoting you to team leader for long-range operations," he said without preamble. "You've proven that you can perform under pressure and make the hard decisions that this job requires. But I want to give you access to better equipment." He gestured to a locked cabinet in the corner of his office. "I'm going to trust you with something that most operators never get to touch. It's time you met the Barrett." The Barrett M82A1 50 caliber sniper rifle was unlike anything Maria had ever seen, standing nearly 5 feet long and weighing 30 pounds. It was more like a piece of artillery than a conventional rifle. Commander Harrison unlocked the cabinet and carefully lifted the massive weapon, setting it on his desk with reverence usually reserved for religious artifacts. "This is a Barrett M82A1, Harrison explained, his voice taking on the tone of someone discussing something sacred. 50 caliber, semi-automatic, effective range over 2,000 yards in the right hands. Most snipers train for years before they're trusted with something like this. The recoil alone can break ribs if you don't know what you're doing." Maria studied the weapon carefully. She had read about Barrett rifles during her ballistics studies, but seeing one in person was intimidating. The massive scope, the enormous muzzle brake, the heavy bipod legs. Everything about it screamed danger and precision in equal measure. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "I've never fired anything larger than a .338 Lapua. Are you sure I'm ready for something like this?" Harrison smiled. "Santos, 3 months ago you were writing traffic tickets in Los Angeles. Last night you conducted successful long-range engagements against multiple targets while under fire and saved an entire SEAL team. I think you can handle learning to shoot a Barrett." The training began immediately. Maria spent hours learning to properly position herself behind the massive rifle, understanding how to manage the tremendous recoil that could literally knock an unprepared shooter unconscious. The Barrett's 50 caliber rounds were as long as her index finger and packed enough power to disable vehicles or punch through concrete walls. Her first shot was memorable for all the wrong reasons. Despite Harrison's warnings about the recoil, nothing had prepared her for the violent kick of the Barrett. The muzzle blast was so loud it set off car alarms in the parking lot 200 yards away, and the concussion wave rattled windows throughout the building. "Everyone gets knocked around by their first Barrett shot," Harrison said, as he helped her up from where the recoil had deposited her. "The question is whether you want to try again or stick with smaller rifles." Maria rubbed her shoulder where the stock had impacted it and looked at the target downrange. Despite being knocked backward by the recoil, her shot had struck exactly where she had aimed. The massive 50 caliber round had punched a hole through the target that she could have put her fist through. "Let me try again," she said, already adjusting her position behind the rifle. Over the following weeks, Maria mastered the Barrett with the same systematic approach she had applied to every other weapon system. She learned to read wind at extreme distances, calculate bullet drop for shots that traveled more than a mile, and most importantly, developed the physical techniques necessary to fire the massive rifle accurately shot after shot. The Barrett became an extension of her will. At distances where other snipers struggled to hit man-sized targets, Maria could place 50 caliber rounds with surgical precision. During one training exercise, she successfully engaged targets at 1,800 yards, a distance where the targets were barely visible dots even through high-powered optics. Webb, who had become one of her strongest supporters, watched in amazement as she consistently achieved hits at ranges that challenged even the most experienced military snipers. "Santos," he said after she had completed a particularly difficult shooting exercise, "I've worked with Marine Scout snipers who couldn't make some of the shots you're making. Where did this come from?" Maria had been asking herself the same question. Her natural ability with firearms seemed to have no logical explanation. She had never hunted as a child, had no family military background, and had received no special training beyond what any police officer might receive. Yet she could consistently outshoot operators who had trained at prestigious military sniper schools. "I honestly don't know," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels like the rifle is just an extension of my eyes. I see where I want the bullet to go and it goes there." Her opportunity to prove herself with the Barrett came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence had identified a high-value target operating from a compound in the mountains of Afghanistan. The target was a bomb maker responsible for attacks on American forces, and eliminating him had become a top priority for the Special Operations community. The mission would require a precision shot at extreme range. The target's compound was situated on a mountainside, protected by natural terrain that made a conventional assault extremely difficult. The only viable approach was a long-range engagement from an adjacent mountain peak, a shot that would require both exceptional skill and perfect conditions. Harrison assembled a small team for the operation. Webb's SEAL team would provide security and spotting assistance, while Maria would serve as the primary shooter. The shot distance was calculated at 2,247 yards, nearly a mile and a half. At that range, the bullet would take over 3 seconds to reach its target, requiring perfect calculations for wind, temperature, humidity, and the Earth's rotation. "Santos," Harrison said during the final briefing, "this is the kind of shot that makes careers or ends them. The target will only be exposed for a few seconds when he conducts his daily inspection of the compound's perimeter. Miss and he disappears for months. We might not get another chance." The team inserted into Afghanistan under cover of darkness, hiking 12 miles through mountainous terrain to reach their observation post. Maria carried the Barrett and its ammunition, an additional 40 pounds of equipment that would have challenged much larger operators. But she had trained with the weapon system until it felt natural, and the extra weight was just another variable to account for. They established their position on a rocky outcropping that provided clear line of sight to the target compound. Using high-powered spotting scopes, they confirmed the target's daily routine and identified the exact moment when he would be most vulnerable. At 0800 hours, exactly as intelligence had predicted, the target emerged from his compound for his morning inspection. He was a tall man with a distinctive beard, wearing traditional Afghan clothing that made him easily identifiable against the compound's concrete walls. Maria settled behind the Barrett, adjusting her position until everything felt perfect. Webb lay beside her with a spotting scope, calling out wind conditions and range corrections. The morning air was still, which was crucial for such an extreme distance shot. "Wind is calm, 2 miles per hour from the east," Webb reported quietly. "Range confirmed at 2,247 yards. Target is moving along the compound's east wall." Maria made minute adjustments to her scope, accounting for the bullet's trajectory over such an enormous distance. At this range, she had to aim nearly 20 feet above her target to compensate for gravity's effect on the massive .50 caliber round. The calculation included atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth. Through her scope, the target looked like a tiny figure moving across a postage stamp. The magnification was so extreme that her heartbeat could throw off her aim if she didn't time the shot perfectly. She controlled her breathing, waiting for the natural pause between heartbeats that every precision shooter learns to recognize. "Target is stopping," Webb whispered. "He's looking out over the valley. You have maybe 10 seconds before he moves again." Maria's world narrowed to the crosshairs in her scope and the distant figure nearly a mile and a half away. Every factor had been calculated, every variable accounted for. The shot would take 3.2 seconds to reach its target, during which time the Earth would rotate slightly and the target might move. She had to predict where he would be when the bullet arrived, not where he was when she fired. She squeezed the trigger with the same smooth, controlled pressure she had practiced thousands of times. The Barrett's thunderous report echoed across the valley, and Maria watched through her scope as the massive round began its long journey toward the target. For 3.2 seconds, time seemed suspended. The bullet traveled at over 2,800 feet per second, but at such extreme range, its flight seemed almost leisurely. Maria held her sight picture, tracking the target through her scope, watching for the impact. The bullet struck exactly where she had aimed. The target dropped instantly, eliminated by a single shot fired from a distance that most people would consider impossible. The entire compound erupted in confusion as guards searched frantically for the source of the attack. But Maria's team was so far away that the sound of the shot didn't reach the compound for several more seconds. "Target down," Webb confirmed through his spotting scope. "Clean hit." "Outstanding shot, Santos." The team withdrew from their position and began the long hike back to their extraction point. During the 12-mile trek through the mountains, Webb kept shaking his head in amazement. "Santos, do you realize what you just did? That was one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in military history, and you made it look routine." Maria was still processing the magnitude of what had happened. 3 months ago, she had been a patrol officer in Los Angeles. Now she had just conducted one of the most challenging precision shots ever attempted by American forces. When they returned to base, word of the successful mission spread quickly through the special operations community. A female police officer had accomplished something that the most elite military snipers would consider a career-defining achievement. The shot had been so challenging that some experienced operators initially refused to believe it had happened. Commander Harrison called Maria into his office the next day, but this time he wasn't alone. A general she didn't recognize was seated across from Harrison's desk, studying a thick file that she assumed contained details about the mission. "Santos," Harrison said, "I'd like you to meet General Patricia Morrison, Commanding Officer of Special Operations Command. She flew in specifically to meet you." General Morrison stood and extended her hand. "Officer Santos, I've been following your career with great interest. What you accomplished yesterday was extraordinary, but I understand it's just the latest in a series of exceptional performances." Maria wasn't sure how to respond.
Meeting a general was intimidating under any circumstances, but having one fly across the country specifically to meet her was overwhelming.
"Thank you, ma'am," she managed. "I was just doing my job." Morrison smiled. "Santos, what you did yesterday wasn't just doing your job. That was making military history. Commander Harrison has recommended you for several commendations, but I have something else in mind." She opened the file on Harrison's desk and pulled out a document that Maria didn't recognize. "I'm offering you a direct commission as a warrant officer in the United States Army. You would lead a specialized sniper unit that handles the most challenging long-range missions our forces encounter. The position comes with significant responsibility, but also with access to resources and support that would allow you to operate at the highest levels of military special operations." Maria stared at the commission papers, struggling to comprehend how quickly her life was changing. 6 months ago, she had been writing traffic tickets. Now she was being offered a leadership position in the most elite military units in the world. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I'm honored by the offer, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to lead experienced military snipers. Most of them have years of training and combat experience that I don't have." Morrison's expression became serious. "Santos, yesterday you made a shot that maybe a dozen people in the entire world could make. You've consistently outperformed operators with decades of experience. Your qualifications aren't measured in time served or schools attended. They're measured in results, and your results speak for themselves." She leaned forward. "More importantly, you've proven that you can make the hard decisions under pressure. Leadership isn't about having the most experience. It's about having the judgment to use whatever experience you have effectively." Maria looked at Commander Harrison, who nodded encouragingly. "Santos, I've worked with hundreds of operators during my career. You have something that can't be taught in any school or training program. The military needs people like you, especially in leadership positions. Taking the commission would mean leaving behind everything familiar. No more patrol duties, no more routine police work, no more quiet life in Los Angeles. Instead, she would be thrust into a world of international operations, high-stakes missions, and responsibilities that could affect national security." But she had learned something important during her journey from patrol officer to elite sniper. Sometimes the most important decisions were the ones that seemed impossible. Sometimes you had to trust that your skills and judgment would be enough, even when everyone around you expressed doubt. "General Morrison," she said, meeting the general's eyes directly, "I accept your offer." Warrant Officer Maria Santos stood before her new unit for the first time, feeling the weight of command settling on her shoulders like an ill-fitting uniform. The 12 soldiers assembled in the briefing room represented the Army's most elite snipers, each with multiple combat deployments and years of specialized training. They stared at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, a veteran with 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, spoke first. "Ma'am, with all due respect, most of us have been wondering how a police officer with 6 months of military experience gets appointed to lead this unit." His tone was respectful but carried an undercurrent of challenge that everyone in the room could hear. Maria had expected this moment. She had spent sleepless nights preparing for it, knowing that her authority would be questioned until she proved herself worthy of their respect. Her record spoke for itself, but records were just numbers on paper. These soldiers needed to see leadership in action. Sergeant Rodriguez, she replied calmly. Your question is fair, and I'm sure others are thinking the same thing. My background is different from yours, and I won't pretend that 6 months of joint operations makes me equivalent to your years of experience. She paused, meeting each soldier's eyes in turn. What I will tell you is that I didn't ask for this position. I was selected because General Morrison believes I can lead this unit effectively. Whether she's right or wrong will be determined by our performance together, not by debates about my qualifications. The tension in the room was palpable. Maria could see some soldiers nodding thoughtfully, while others remained unconvinced. She had one chance to establish her credibility, and she knew it had to be decisive. I understand that trust is earned, not assigned, she continued. So here's what I propose. Tomorrow morning we'll conduct live fire exercises at extended range. Anyone who wants to test my abilities against theirs is welcome to do so. If I can't outshoot the people I'm supposed to lead, then you have legitimate grounds to question my appointment. Rodriguez exchanged glances with several other soldiers before responding. Ma'am, that's a fair offer. But I hope you understand that some of us have been doing this for longer than you've been out of the police academy. The next morning, the entire unit assembled at the base's long-range shooting facility. Word had spread about the challenge, and a crowd of observers gathered to watch the new warrant officer face off against some of the Army's best snipers. General Morrison herself arrived to observe, along with Commander Harrison and several other senior officers. The challenge was structured as a series of increasingly difficult shots, starting at 800 yards and extending to 2,000 yards. Each participant would engage targets at all distances, with points awarded for accuracy and consistency. Maria would compete directly against Rodriguez and 2 other senior members of the unit. The first few distances were routine for snipers of their caliber. All 4 shooters achieved perfect or near-perfect scores at 800, 1,000, and 1,200 yards. The watching soldiers began to murmur among themselves as they realized their new commander could indeed shoot at their level. At 500 yards, the difficulty increased significantly. Wind conditions were challenging, and the targets appeared as tiny dots even through high-powered scopes. Rodriguez fired first, achieving a respectable grouping that would have been considered excellent in most circumstances. The other 2 soldiers performed similarly, with groupings that demonstrated their years of training and experience. Maria approached the firing line with her Barrett rifle, the same weapon that had become her signature during operations with the Joint Task Force. She took her time reading wind conditions and calculating the complex ballistics required for such an extreme shot. The observers watched in silence as she made minute adjustments to her scope and settled into her shooting position. Her first shot struck dead center of the target. Her second shot enlarged the same hole. Her third shot created a grouping smaller than a silver dollar at a distance where most people couldn't clearly see the target. Jesus Christ, Rodriguez muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. How the hell did she do that? At 2,000 yards, only Maria and Rodriguez remained in the competition. The other 2 soldiers had acknowledged that they were outclassed and stepped aside. This distance was beyond the effective range of most sniper rifles, requiring perfect conditions and exceptional skill to achieve consistent hits. Rodriguez fired 3 shots that created a respectable grouping, demonstrating why he was considered one of the unit's best snipers. But Maria's 3 shots created a grouping half the size of Rodriguez's, clustered around the exact center of the target. The range fell silent as the soldiers processed what they had witnessed. Their new commander hadn't just competed with experienced military snipers. She had clearly outperformed them at distances that challenged even the most elite marksmen. Rodriguez walked over to where Maria was cleaning her rifle and extended his hand. Ma'am, I owe you an apology. I questioned your qualifications based on assumptions that were clearly wrong. You've just demonstrated that you can outshoot anyone in this unit, including me. He turned to address the other soldiers. I don't know how Warrant Officer Santos developed these skills, and frankly, I don't care. What matters is that she's proven she belongs here. She's got my full support from now on. The other soldiers nodded in agreement, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine respect. Maria had done more than prove her shooting ability. She had demonstrated the kind of performance under pressure that earned trust in military units. Over the following months, Maria led the sniper unit through a series of successful operations around the world. Her tactical decisions proved as sound as her marksmanship, and her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure became legendary among special operations forces. During a mission in Syria, she successfully coordinated simultaneous long-range engagements by multiple team members, eliminating an entire terrorist cell leadership in a single operation. In Somalia, she made a 1-800-yard shot that prevented an attack on American diplomatic personnel. Each mission built her reputation and strengthened her units, confidence in her leadership, but perhaps her most important contribution was changing perceptions about who could succeed in elite military roles. Her success opened doors for other non-traditional candidates who might have been overlooked by conventional selection processes. Rodriguez, who had become one of her strongest supporters, put it best during a conversation with Commander Harrison. "Sir, when Santos first showed up, I thought the Army had lost its mind. A small female police officer leading elite snipers? It seemed like political correctness run amok." He paused, shaking his head at his own former attitudes. "But she's taught me something important. Talent doesn't come in the package you expect. She's not just the best shot I've ever worked with. She's the best leader I've served under. She makes everyone around her better." 2 years after accepting her commission, Warrant Officer Santos received the Distinguished Service Cross for her actions during a classified operation that saved the lives of an entire Special Forces team. The citation praised her exceptional courage under fire and extraordinary marksmanship skills that reflect the highest traditions of military service. Standing at the award ceremony, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her from writing traffic tickets in Los Angeles to leading one of the Army's most elite units. Every person who had underestimated her, every doubt that had been expressed about her abilities, had become fuel for her determination to prove them wrong. General Morrison, who presented the award, spoke to the assembled crowd about the importance of recognizing talent wherever it might be found. "Warrant Officer Santos represents the best of American military values," she said. "Her story reminds us that exceptional people often come from unexpected places, and that our job as leaders is to identify and develop that talent, regardless of conventional expectations." After the ceremony, Maria found herself thinking about all the young women who might be watching her story, wondering if they too could overcome the assumptions and limitations that others tried to place on them. She had learned that the most powerful weapon wasn't the Barrett rifle she carried, but the refusal to accept other people's definitions of what she could or couldn't accomplish. Commander Harrison approached her after the ceremony, wearing the same expression he had worn when he first offered her a position with the Joint Task Force. "Santos, I have another proposition for you. The Pentagon is establishing a new training program to identify and develop non-traditional candidates for special operations roles. They want you to lead it." Maria smiled, remembering the scared police officer who had once worried about whether she belonged in elite military circles. That person seemed like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime who had no idea what she was capable of achieving. "Sir," she replied, "I'd be honored to help others discover what they can accomplish when someone believes in them." From the ceremony, Maria Santos carried with her the knowledge that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with a single person willing to look beyond appearances and trust in unexpected potential. Everyone had underestimated her once, but Commander Harrison had seen something others